this is Callimara here, and no, it's not calamari. Welcome back to the channel, or if you're new to the pond, go ahead and take a dive. You might like it here. So, I know the title of this video is a bit controversial, but trust me, I am not a right-wing anti-SJW, nor am I the kind of girl who hates Barbies for one reason or another. In fact, just because I was disappointed in the movie does not mean I thought it was a bad movie. On the contrary, I think the Barbie movie had a genuinely good and important message, and it got through to a lot of people who didn't know the experience of womanhood, even though it was delivered in a bit of a heavy-handed way. And it explores a concept that, as a fashion doll line with the slogan, "You can be anything," surprisingly has never explored before. That women can just be. They don't have to be anything outstanding or strive for great heights to be considered a person, as opposed to an object, something to be owned or used or to serve someone else. Just as it's enough for a man to simply be a man to be considered a person in the eyes of society. I think that's a beautiful message and a clever critique of modern feminist movement, where in encouraging women to pursue paths previously inaccessible to them because it was originally reserved for men, it has at the same time painted, intentionally or not, traditional roles women had before, like being a mother, wanting to be a homemaker or a caretaker, as something inferior on the merit that it was a predominantly feminine role and still dictating what women can and can't want. And I know not all third-wave feminists are like this. A lot of them are simply advocating for women to have the ability to choose what they want to do, be it to be a housewife, to be a career woman, to cover up or to not cover up. I'm more so calling out the people who, in their attempts to be progressive, actually end up pivoting to misogyny and cultural insensitivity. If anything, I think I just had different expectations for what the Barbie movie would be. See, I am a Barbie girl through and through. I watched all the animated Barbie movies growing up. I had a couple of dolls that I really liked that I had to beg my mom for because in my country, those dolls were the price of groceries for an entire month for a family of 4. And I even modeled for Barbie's fashion line as a kid. Barbie was my bread and butter, and I still frequently rewatch the old Barbie movies I grew up with whenever I need a comfort watch. And that's exactly why the Barbie movie was not quite what I expected. Not only as an avid Barbie fan, but an avid Barbie Cinematic Universe fan. So let's talk about it. For this video, I will be drawing on Clip Studio Paint using the Studio VK1200 V2 screen tablet that was kindly sent to me from Vake. This tablet is a full screen display with an 11-inch anti-glare full HD IPS screen with 1920 by 1080 resolution and 6 shortcut keys. It's definitely smaller than your average screen tablet, so I think this tablet would be ideal for someone who likes to work on a laptop outside of their house, like cafes like I do, or someone who's just starting out with a screen tablet. It's also the right resolution for screen recording if you like to make speed draws like me. But my favorite thing about this tablet, and something that I always look for when shopping for screen tablets, is that it has a fully laminated screen. Why is this such a big deal to me? Because laminated screens minimize parallax, which is the gap between the position of the pen tip and where the cursor actually is on your window. And this tablet definitely has that. The only downside I found was that the screen is a lot more slippery than I expected for a real paper-like drawing experience compared to drawing on my iPad Pro and Apple Pencil. I felt like I had a harder time getting a grip on the screen, so the pen was gliding around a bit too fast for my liking, but that may be because the pen has a full plastic nib. I'm someone who prefers felt or rubber tips for more friction, but that's up to personal preference, and you can replace the tip pretty easily to suit yours. Otherwise, it's a pretty solid tablet, and it's also super affordable as far as full display tablets go in my opinion. The pressure sensitivity is genuinely excellent. Just look at my line dynamics here. So if you're currently looking to upgrade to a screen tablet from your regular drawing pad, I highly recommend this one. So, if you didn't grow up watching the Barbie movies like I did, or have never watched any of the old Barbie movies at all, maybe this sentiment is something that you won't be able to understand, and I don't think it's something you will ever understand simply because that time has passed. That moment where you were young enough to believe that magic could truly be real, that magical creatures existed, and it was all waiting for you behind an enchanted door or through a magical forest no one has dared explore before. It wasn't just a certain age, but also the era these movies came out in, a time when the internet was not quite as accessible as it is now, when the media accessible to you as a child were books or magazines or cable television and movies in theaters. The start of the 21st century, when everything was still new and hopeful, and you still believed that the future held something good. That optimism, that touch of softness and fantasy and whimsy in visuals, when the scale of the stories felt simultaneously simple yet grand at the same time. That to me was what made the Barbie movies so special. Sure, Bratz was also big on the scene at the time, but for me personally, it just didn't have the same kind of magic and whimsy that Barbie had. It was trendy and cutting edge, yes, but I loved the pastel aesthetics, magic, and romantic faraway kingdoms, the gentle music, and obviously, the transformation sequences that have become a Barbie movie staple. That's why, of the Bratz movies, my favorite was the Pixies one. I also just loved Barbie's art style a lot more, especially the classic Barbie movies, where Barbie looked and acted more like an adult I could look up to. And that's probably why I kind of fell off the Barbie movies after the latest reboot and art style change. But I really did try to like it. I've always made it a habit to kind of check up on the newest Barbie movies that come out because I like to go and watch them. But I was already kind of shaky on the modern era movies where they began to introduce modern technology, changing the music direction from calming and whimsical instrumentals to high energy beats and pop songs. The colors became more saturated and the setting more realistic and down to earth, if not kind of artificial and plasticky. And that's just not what I look for or come to expect from the Barbie movies. That's actually Bratz territory, and the lower budget animation aside, it's actually also why I prefer Barbie movies over Bratz movies. I think the last few modern Barbie movies I enjoyed were Barbie Starlight Adventure, which really surprised me. I did not expect it to be that good, even though it's basically just Barbie Star Wars, along with Fashion Fairy Tale and Princess Charm School, which was from the era before it. I think the last movie that kind of soured me on the Barbie franchise was Barbie and the Pink Shoes, which I just thought was so... It really tried to be what the classic Barbie movies were and just completely dropped the ball, in my opinion. Everything else just failed to capture that same magic and whimsy of the classic Barbie movie era. Now, granted, I'm not about to glaze Barbie by spouting every single marketing punchline and propaganda they threw out there to trick parents into thinking these dolls were inspirational for their daughters. And granted, they probably truly meant well, especially with their "You can be anything" tagline, which has been trademarked by Mattel since 1984 and officially became Barbie's slogan in 2015. We've seen Barbie as a doctor, an astronaut, a veterinarian, and a dentist, trying to show little girls that they could be anything they wanted to be, even if it didn't really work.
I just read the most unhinged study on Barbie, and it's that, you know how they have those career Barbies now? Like there's a Dr. Barbie and a vet Barbie and an astronaut Barbie and all these Barbies that can help girls think about all the things they'd like to be in the future. Well, one study, and they actually did this in 2014, so I think it probably needs to be done again, but essentially one study took 3 different types of toys, a fashion Barbie, a Dr. Barbie, and a Mrs. Potato Head, just a random like standard Mrs. Potato Head, and they were randomly assigned to one of those toys, right? And then they let the girls play with them. Then they took the toys away from those little girls, and then they showed them like an array of careers that the little girls could engage in the future. And then they asked, what would you do in the future? And then what could boys do in the future? And God bless Barbie tried, okay? Barbie tried. However, Here are the results. I will read them out to you. Girls who played with either form of Barbie, doctor or fashion, reported that they could do fewer occupations compared to boys. In contrast, girls who played with Mrs. Potato Head reported a smaller difference between the number of careers they felt they could pursue and those they believed boys could pursue.
You know what they say, the path to hell was paved with good intentions. But I'm gonna be completely honest here. I didn't give a damn about those Dr. Barbie dolls. As a kid, what I cared about was the gorgeous princess dolls with beautiful dresses, glittery wings, and horse companions. And that was because of the Barbie movies. And I'm kind of convinced that Barbie is also the reason I'm a horse girl. Barbie radicalized me into equestrian sports. Even as a young child, I was fully aware that there was a separation between Barbie movies and the reality I faced whenever I went to school. The Barbie movies have always been an escape to me because while it had good messages like you're braver than you know, your differences make you stronger, I was never in it for the writing. Heck, when I was a kid, I barely even knew English, and most of the time, the subtitles were complete gibberish anyway because I lived in Indonesia, and if you were middle class or lower, all your DVDs were pirated, okay? So the subtitles were whatever the guy decided it was. I was following purely on context clues. But I wanted to live in that world. I wanted the magic, the magical creatures, the grand adventures, and maybe some of the love story too. Though I'll admit, even as a kid, I got annoyed that every one of the classic Barbie movies ended with a wedding. Not for the social connotation that Barbie made it seem like being a bride is a girl's ultimate goal or any deep reason like that. Unfortunately, I was not that woke as a child. Just that I thought it was predictable, and sometimes I thought the prince was ugly, so I didn't want Barbie to marry him. Honestly, as with most girl-centered media I watched, the romance in the Barbie movies were my least favorite parts of the story. I don't know, the male character models were really meh to me, and I think I didn't really understand romance or the appeal of it at that age. And really, I never would. Foreshadowing. I never had much of a boy crazy or love crazy phase growing up unless you counted 2D animated characters. So that part really wasn't for me. And that's actually one thing I was glad about in Greta Gerwig's Barbie movie. I'm glad they didn't try to add romance to the story because as per the movie's tagline, she's everything and he's just Ken. You buy the Ken for the Barbie, not the other way around. He is her glorified accessory, okay? No different than a handbag or an additional outfit set. But to call the Barbie movie a love letter to the Barbie franchise doesn't feel quite right to me, because if anything, it felt more like a critique. And Greta's depiction of Barbie feels more like satire, an appeal to the wider demographic whose understanding of Barbie comes from the generalizations and stereotypes of Barbie depicted in other media, rather than the people who actually grew up loving Barbie and watching the media that Barbie put out. Because the perception between those two demographics, I feel, are completely different. Just as I'm sure someone who never played with Barbies or preferred Bratz and Monster High wouldn't understand my perception of Barbie, I don't think I'll ever understand their perception either. Malibu Barbie, vapid, airheaded, hot pink loving Barbie who only cares about fashion and parties and going to the beach. Aqua's Barbie girl Barbie. They were never present in any of the Barbie related media I grew up with. And yes, you can argue that Greta Gerwig's Barbie is meant to be stereotypical Barbie. The Barbie everyone thinks of when they think of Barbie. And maybe this is exclusively a me problem, but that's not who Barbie is to me or what I think of when I think of stereotypical Barbie. I think of Barbie and I immediately think Swan Lake, that soft melodic theme of 12 Dancing Princesses and Rapunzel. The Barbie I know is level-headed, clever, resourceful, kind even when the world isn't kind to her. She's brave and stands up for what's right. She puts others first. She's the oldest sister who grows up too fast so her sisters can stay kids. She grows and learns, and she leads with love because that's who she is in the movies. Yes, each movie has a slightly different iteration of Barbie with her own unique personalities, but they all had the same core identity, that Barbie is capable and resilient. Even when she's not the best, even when she's not the smartest, even when she's out of her depth, she doesn't give up and she never loses sight of who she is. And there isn't a single reference to any of this in the Barbie movie, which honestly really shocked me. Yes, there are many Barbies in Barbie Land aside from stereotypical Barbie who we follow, but they can't even throw in any of the Barbie movie protagonists. No Elena, Annika, Odette, or Annalise. Not even the staple side characters like Raquel or Teresa, or even any of Barbie's sisters aside from that one Skipper doll they specifically included as a reject Barbie. They included an Alan, who is Ken's friend, so why aren't any of Barbie's friends referred to by name? Not even a cameo from Barbie's legendary voice actor Kelly Sheridan, who I, and I'm sure so many others, grew up with. I think the closest representation of how this felt for me was when Ted Nevison did that video watching all the classic Barbie movies to be caught up on all the references and lore, only for none of it to be relevant in the Greta Gerwig Barbie. So how can it really be a love letter when all it features are the superficial plastic and artificial perfection of a Barbie? I think it's maybe what an adult sees when they watch their young children play with a Barbie, the playhouses, playsets, and clothes, the artificial pools and plants, and the plastic smoothness, but none of the experience of actually playing with one and what that's like. Barbie Land is depicted as this perfect utopia where nothing goes wrong, but the Barbie I grew up with was never perfect. Sometimes she was flawed. Sometimes she was even messy. She learned and grew as a person to become who she needed to be at the end of the story, and the worlds that the movies were set in were no different. Each setting they created in the animated Barbie movies were organic and alive. It breathed, it had a life of its own. It grew and changed alongside the characters. It wasn't just a background, it was the escape, the thing that made you wish you could be there too. And because of that, I think the animated Barbie movies did a better job of capturing what it was like actually playing with the dolls. Anyone who played with any kind of doll could tell you that even as a child, we would come up with the wildest worlds, storylines, and drama. Everything and everyone was messy. Nothing was ever used as intended, and that was the point. It was immersive and organic, and maybe it was just me, but I've always been more drawn to the nature and magic-themed doll lines featuring mermaids and fairies and forests over the beach house playsets. And even if what they wanted to do was emulate that plastic doll-like aesthetic with meta humor, I still think the movie was outdone by Barbie Life in the Dream House, which is what I'd consider a true love letter to the Barbie franchise. It was everything that the Barbie movie tried to do with Barbie Land while still maintaining Barbie's character as this multifaceted polymath Renaissance woman who could do it all, and do it all fabulously, all while keeping her friends and sisters, integral parts of her identity that any true Barbie fan would know, in it too. And let's be honest, Life in the Dream House Ken is the most biblically accurate Ken in every sense of the word. In all honesty, I was waiting the entire movie for stereotypical Barbie to have her wake-up call, to realize that the way she perceives the world and herself is flawed, and get the ball rolling for her character development. In fact, there already is a perfect moment in the movie where they could have done this, and it was the scene where she meets Sasha. Sasha basically calls out all the flaws and harm that the Barbie dolls have done to young girls, including all the generalizations and stereotypes that come when people think of Barbies. And I really wish that that scene had more impact, not only to the story, but to Barbie as a character. I really wish that she was given time to think it over, to realize that times have changed, and that maybe the way she is obsolete. That she needs to change if she wants to be what little girls need her to be, instead of being kidnapped and thrown into a car chase. And I think that's also another thing that the movie missed. Not the car chase, but the fact that Barbie is marketed to be a role model. I think the Barbie movie made the fatal flaw of trying to portray Barbie as being equal to her audience. Something you relate to, or something that is a reflection of you, when in reality, well, my reality at least, Barbie is and always has been your cool, amazing big sister who can do anything and who wants you to succeed like her too. That's why they made her the oldest of her sisters, why early Barbie movies start with her giving advice and guidance to her sister. Because in Barbie's canon, she cares about you, the audience, who is represented by her younger sisters. Barbie is not your average girl next door that you look at and think, yeah, that could be me. She is a literal goddess made flesh that you couldn't possibly hope to touch, but only aspire to be like. And I think that's also where the newer Barbie movies featuring a more down-to-earth, relatable Barbie kind of loses me, because she's always been this kind of mythical being to me. Like, even as a child, I knew I would never be Barbie, so I never really tried to compare myself to her. I just took the lesson she taught, and look where I am today. But that's just me though. I think some people were a bit more ambitious and lofty in their expectations of what they would be when they grew up. But Barbie is and always has been a Mary Sue, and I think it's wrong for us to erase that about her. It's literally integral to who she is. You wouldn't write Superman, and I do mean Superman the persona and not Clark Kent, as this quirky, dorky, everyday boy next door, basically transferring the Clark Kent personality onto Superman. Because he's an icon, a symbol, a god among men, and that is what Barbie is to me. She's my Superman. I think my biggest dissatisfaction is that while those themes and conversations about womanhood, motherhood, and girlhood are there, it also doesn't affect Barbie. It happens around her. It doesn't change her or move her, and she never really expresses or shows any desire for anything but her status quo, which is why, to me, the conclusion of her choosing to be a real woman did not feel earned. And to be fair, while the hints are there in lingering shots of Margot Barbie, it could have been more. As it stands, Barbie's transformation into a real woman is an unstoppable, inevitable process brought on by a force beyond Barbie's control that still would have happened whether or not she chose to travel to the real world. The lore of the movie implies that every Barbie ever conceived of by anyone who has ever played with a Barbie, which is why it's even more unbelievable that the movie tie-in dolls and playsets never made an appearance, but that's beside the point, ends up in Barbie Land. I kind of thought of it as a chalk zone situation where every chalk drawing that gets erased ends up in the chalk world, and with that concept in mind, I've always seen Barbie's transformation as her simply becoming what the last person playing with her imagined her to be, because it was Gloria playing with her and coming up with realistic Barbie concepts. Now, don't get me wrong, I still think it's a great inciting event, but it's what they did with it that I think could have been a bit more refined. Like, instead of her just seeing that old woman and calling her beautiful, she also later on looks at herself in the mirror and imagines herself as an old woman. And instead of being scared or repulsed by it like she originally was by her transformation, she reaches out and finds that she loves how she looks then too. Maybe when she observes the kids playing at the park for the first time she arrives in the human world, or when she watches Gloria with Sasha, she also starts to long for that connection. Maybe she pictures herself with a kid, wondering what it's like to be a mother like Gloria. or even tries to imagine what it's like to have a mother, wondering what it's like to be a daughter. Maybe she spends time bonding with Sasha, getting to know what she likes, and she learns what it's like to be a sister. All these simple, seemingly mundane things that come with being a woman, but to a doll like her, becomes something extraordinary, something to be celebrated. And despite now also knowing what women in the real world deal with the patriarchy and having to suffer through that, she still chooses to be one anyway because she loved that experience so much. And it would still fit with the movie's iconic "What Was I Made For" track and Ruth's parting message that Barbie's story doesn't have a set ending, which also honors Barbie's tagline, "You can be anything." But in the actual Barbie movie, Barbie began and ended the same way, with her spectating and having things happen to her and around her. She doesn't really affect the story in any real way. She was just the audience's proxy, and I'll be honest, I got more frustrated with how passive she was the longer the movie went on. Even when Barbie successfully returned to Barbie Land, excited to show Gloria and Sasha what it's like there, she completely fell apart and gave up when she learned that the Kens have taken over. It was the other Barbies, Gloria and Sasha, that had to put the pieces back together and do most of the work. And that's another thing that disappointed me about Margot Barbie. She lacks resilience. Every Barbie, even if she's not depicted as ultra capable, even if she's still an airhead, she has always been shown to be resilient. Even when things seem hopeless and bad, she picks herself up and carries on. Not always for herself, but sometimes, most of the time, she does it for the sake of those she cares about. And that's another issue I had with the Barbie movie. And maybe it is just me being autistic and not picking up on the social cues, but it really felt like Margot Barbie didn't really care about anything in the movie. Not the young kids she was made for, not Barbie Land or any of her friends, not even Gloria, who was there for her through it all. I never really felt that Barbie had sufficient time to bond with Gloria and Sasha. It would have been nice to see Gloria becoming something of a mother figure to Barbie and Sasha teaching her what little girls are like these days. So yeah, I was really hoping they would do more with Margot Barbie, even if they didn't fully make her accurate to the animated movies or series. Because remember, the core message is that you don't have to be extraordinary or shoot for the stars to matter. I at least wanted to see her start to care about other people, about anything other than herself and her identity, but hey, maybe that's just my color showing because I was raised in a collectivist Asian culture where it was very community-centered rather than centering on the individual. At the very least, I was really hoping that she would be the person to reclaim Barbie Land from the Kens. She can still cry and feel like she's failing, but I really wish that after hearing Gloria's empowering speech and seeing how disappointed Gloria and Sasha were that Barbie Land was not what they expected, she actually does get empowered and takes the lead on the operation in order to make that world that they wish they had, just like the Barbie I know and love would. Because as it stands, she is now the only Barbie in Barbie Land who knows what the real world is like and how the men there act. And she knows what the Kens are actually like and what they're trying to emulate. Something that no other Barbie or Gloria and Sasha know, because they only know one or the other. So it would have been a great full circle moment to have her apply what she learned, have her grow out of her passiveness into a more proactive character as she realizes she has something that she wants to strive towards and protect, and people that she cares about that she doesn't want to see hurt. And in the end, they could still have her decide that she's not stereotypical Barbie anymore, that she doesn't want to be a Barbie anymore. She wants to be able to grow old, to change, to have stretch marks and wrinkles and be more than what her box tells her she is, to be a real woman, not just a symbol or an icon, but a person. And I think this decision would have been more impactful because of it. Honestly, my expectations coming into the Barbie movie was that it would be about proving the stereotype wrong and showing how much Barbie actually means to people, how much hope and aspirations she gives to little girls who still play with Barbies, you know, Legally Blonde style. But in my opinion, it actually had a much more pessimistic and negative view of the dolls than I would have preferred. The glamorous shots of Barbie Land, the parties, and the interactions between the characters felt more like satire or sarcasm that was putting the dolls down in order to uplift its message. And as a Barbie girly, that just made me sad because I do have such a fondness for those dolls. So yeah, that's why I was disappointed by the Barbie movie. Thank you so much for hanging out in my channel for a while. I hope your skin didn't get too pruny. Big shout out to my lovely sea bunnies on Patreon. If you want to become a sea bunny and get extra perks like a free commission from me, join my Patreon. If you want to see more from me, then please follow me on all my social media. If you want to submit fan art or chat with me, join my Discord server. And if you want to see more of my stories, check out my Wild Words series here on YouTube because that will make me really happy. All the links are in my description and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye!